So my husband forced Maine to get sterilized, the silent rift that's tearing us apart. So even though he knew my health would be at risk after the procedure, and he did not consider getting sterilized himself. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. My story, though woven with love, is also stitched with pains and decisions that were never easy. My husband, Ethan, who is now 37, has been the anchor in my life for over a decade. And we met when we were both just stepping out into the world, me, a fledgling graphic designer, and he, a budding financial analyst. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind, but rather a gentle, steady flame that lit up the darker corners of our lives. So married young, full of hopes and shared dreams, and this year marks our 11th anniversary. Together, we've created a world filled with more than just shared assets and memories. We've brought into this world two beautiful souls, our children. Our first, a boisterous 7-year-old named Lucas, has the spirit of an explorer, his eyes reflecting the boundless energy that only a child possesses. So our latest joy, baby Ava, just arrived into this world, her presence a testament to both love and resilience. Resilience, a term that has defined more of my life than I ever anticipated. You see, my body harbors a secret, one that belies the outward normalcy of my family life. I have a rare, complicating medical condition that transforms pregnancy into a perilous journey. After Lucas' doctors advised against another pregnancy, warning of the severe risks. Yet Ethan and I yearned for another child to complete our family. We braved the storm once more with Ava, but not without consequence. The decision for Ava to be our last was mutual and firm. My body could not withstand another pregnancy. Weeks before Ava was due, my doctor presented an option. One that seemed practical against the backdrop of my medical risks, sterilization. They would be opening me up anyway for a C-section. It seemed opportune. Ethan was supportive when I brought it up. It seemed a straightforward choice in our complicated situation. However, as practical as it sounded, hesitation gnawed at me. Sterilization felt so final, yet the risk of another pregnancy loomed larger than my fears. I remember sitting with Ethan one cool evening, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, discussing the future of our family. It was then, with a heavy heart but a clear mind, that I agreed. We decided together, or so I thought, that this chapter of our lives was to end with my upcoming surgery. We signed off on it, a decision etched in medical records and our hearts. Life has its moments of pure joy and harrowing trials, and often they are intertwined so closely that one cannot untangle them without altering the very fabric of one's existence. This realization hit me, full force, as I entered the 37th week of my pregnancy with our second child, Ava. Ethan and I had been on cloud 9, preparing to welcome our new baby, believing we had a plan in place that addressed all our concerns, including the daunting notion of sterilization that lingered in the back of my mind. However, that week something felt ominously amiss. It was a typical Tuesday evening. Ethan was reading a bedtime story to Lucas, and I was organizing baby clothes for Ava when a sharp pain seized my abdomen. The pain quickly escalated beyond the usual discomforts of late pregnancy. Frightened, I called out to Ethan, my voice threading through the calmness of our home like a sudden storm. Within hours, we were in the sterile, buzzing environment of the emergency room. My doctor, Dr. Reynolds, a kind yet straightforward professional, explained that I was experiencing a significant placental abruption, a serious condition where the placenta detaches from the uterus prematurely. The risk to Ava was immediate and dire, and there was no choice but to proceed with an emergency section. As they wheeled me into the operating room, my thoughts were chaotic, oscillating between concern for my baby and the stark realization that any plans for concurrent sterilization would be shelved. Emergency C-sections, as Dr. Reynolds explained in those terse, tension-filled moments, focused solely on the immediate preservation of life, mine and Ava's. The luxury of integrating a sterilization procedure was impractical and unsafe under such rushed and critical circumstances. Post-delivery, while I held Ava for the first time, relief washing over me in gentle, grateful waves, Dr. Reynolds came to discuss the next steps. Ava was healthy, her cries a vigorous affirmation of life, but the conversation quickly turned sober. The doctor informed me that the window for an opportune sterilization had closed abruptly with the emergency nature of the C-section. Now the path forward was fraught with complications. Emily, Dr. Reynolds began, her voice a blend of empathy and clinical detachment. The surgery went well, but we couldn't perform the sterilization. It's imperative we revisit this soon. Your condition makes any future pregnancy exceedingly dangerous. I advise against delaying this procedure longer than necessary. She detailed the interim measures. A rigorous regime of contraceptives that felt daunting in its intensity and scope. Triple-layered contraceptive strategies were now essential until sterilization could be safely revisited. This was not just a suggestion, it was a medical imperative. As I listened, the weight of her words settled around me like a heavy cloak. Sterilization wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a necessity shadowed by the urgency of my recent brush with a life-threatening situation. Yet despite the clear medical advice, a part of me felt adrift, caught in a storm of what-ifs and the silent, stoic resistance from Ethan about revisiting his stance on the matter. The room, filled with the soft cues and gentle rustling of our newborn, felt paradoxically both full of life and laden with unspoken tensions. As I cradled Ava, her tiny hand gripping my finger with innocent trust, the complexity of my emotions mirrored the intricacies of the life I held in my arms. The moment was both an end and a beginning, and the road ahead promised to be as challenging as it was necessary. The arrival of Ethan's grandmother, Miss Sears Harper, coincided with a period of recovery and adjustment for our family. Her presence, typically a source of wisdom and comfort, this time brought with it a softening tension that swept through our already tumultuous sets in. Mrs. Harper, a stern yet loving matriarch, had come to meet her great-granddaughter, Ava, and check on my well-being. As we gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with the sense of freshly brewed tea and concern, she observed quietly before finally voicing a thought payment that pierced the veneer of normalcy we had tried so hard to maintain. "Ethan," she began, her voice firm and cutting through the mundane chatter. "Emily has given you 2 beautiful children, endured major surgeries for your family. Why don't you consider getting the sterilization surgery instead?" Her suggestion hung in the air, palpable and heavy. It seemed to draw all the energy in the room towards itself, and for a moment, silence enveloped us. Ethan's face tightened, the muscles in his jaw working silently. I felt a mix of shock and relief, shock that she had voiced such a private issue so openly, and relief that someone had finally mirrored my own unspoken thoughts. The following day, the conversation continued, albeit under a very different guise. We were visited by Claire, the midwife who had been a pillar of support throughout my last trimester and during the emergency delivery. Mrs. Harper, never one to shy away from difficult conversations, steered the discussion towards the topic of sterilization again. Claire, understanding the sensitivity yet the importance of the subject, took a gentle approach. She explained the nuances of sterilization procedures for men and women, highlighting that a vasectomy was a simpler, less invasive procedure compared to a tubal ligation, which I was considering. Vasectomies typically require less recovery time, involve less risk, and are often completely reversible, she detailed. On the other hand, tubal ligation, especially after the kind of surgeries Emily has already undergone, presents a higher risk and a longer recovery period. So these clinical details added a layer of harsh reality to the discussion. It underscored not just the physical burden I had shouldered, but also the disparity in what Ethan was being asked to consider. Despite the clarity and logic presented by Claire, Ethan's reaction was swift and visceral. So he dismissed the idea almost immediately, his words a blend of discomfort and finality. "So it's different for a man," he stated flatly, his voice devoid of the warmth I had grown accustomed to in our years together. "I won't do it." We agreed Emily would handle it. And that's what should happen. His insistence stung, a bitter pill coated in the familiar guise of marital discord. It wasn't just his words, but the unyielding tone that felt like a barricade rising between us. Here in the soft light of our home, with our newborn daughter cradled in my arms, I felt a distance opening between Ethan and me that was about more than just physical space. It was about the unseen sacrifices, the silent aches, and the shared burdens that suddenly felt all too one-sided. As Ethan stood firm on his stance, the room seemed smaller, the walls echoing with the weight of decisions yet unmade and conversations that spiraled into silent disagreements. Mrs. Harper watched us, her eyes shadowed with concern, perhaps regretting the ripple her words had caused. But her intervention had been a catalyst, unveiling the often unspoken expectations placed on women, on mothers, and on wives. In the quiet moments when Ava slept and the world seemed to pause, just briefly enough for reflection, my thoughts often wandered down paths lined with uncertainty and discomfort. The discussion, or rather the lack of it, about sterilization had not just opened a rift but had begun to feel like a chasm between Ethan and me. It was during these quiet hours that doubts began to gnaw at me, more persistent and unsettling each time. I couldn't shake the feeling of unfairness that clung to me like a second skin. My body bore the marks of our shared journey, scars from 2 C-sections, and the hidden wounds from years of battling hyperemesis gravidarum, a condition that made each pregnancy a trial of endurance against near-constant nausea and dehydration. The physical toll was visible, palpable in every slow movement and tired smile. But it was the emotional toll that weighed most heavily on me during these solitary reflections. Why was my suffering the default option? The surgeries, the recoveries, the endless days and nights of physical and emotional drain. Hadn't I endured enough? The thought that Ethan might be keeping his options open, preserving his ability to have more children in the future with someone else if our paths ever diverged, was a seed of doubt that sprouted bitter roots. This wasn't just about what was practical, it felt increasingly like what was fair, and what was not. These thoughts often crystallized into sharp, jagged fears late at night, when Ethan and I would lie side by side in bed, an ocean of unspoken words flowing between us. I would turn over in my mind the conversations we should have been having. "Do you think it's fair, Ethan?" I imagined asking him. "Do you think it's just that after all my body has gone through, I should be the one to face surgery again?" But these conversations remained imaginary. Whenever I broached the subject, Ethan's responses were curt, his discomfort manifesting as a refusal to engage. "We've already decided this, Emily," he would say, his tone final, leaving no room for the discussions I so desperately needed. His avoidance felt like a wall, cold and unyielding, and each dismissal only served to heighten the sense of isolation within me. The rift widened one evening as we faced each other across the kitchen, a space that had once been filled with laughter and shared cooking experiments, now reduced to a battleground of silent meals and colder glances. "Why won't you even talk about it, Ethan?" I found myself pressing, unable to keep the frustration from my voice. "I don't you see how much I've already gone through?" He looked at me, his face a mask of stoicism. "It's different for men," he repeated, his favorite defense, one that felt more like an evasion with every utterance. His refusal to discuss his reasons left me grappling with shadows, fighting an invisible opponent in a battle I hadn't chosen. The sense of injustice grew, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. Each of Ethan's dismissals felt like a denial of all that I had endured for our family. It wasn't just about the physical acts of bearing children or undergoing surgeries, it was about the shared commitment I believed marriage was supposed to represent. How could he not see that this was about more than logistics or recovery times? It was about respect, about mutual sacrifice, and about recognizing the weight each partner carries in their own way. As these discussions turned into arguments, and arguments lapsed back into silence, the emotional distance between us began to mirror the physical one. We moved around each other like celestial bodies bound by the same orbit but existing in entirely separate worlds. The heartache of this growing divide was palpable, a constant ache that pulsed in time with my own heartbeat. I feared not only for the future of my health but for the foundation of our marriage. Was this how it would be now? A series of negotiations about who bore the burdens and who sidestepped them. As I watched Ethan retreat behind his wall of silence, I felt a resolve hardening within me. This was not just a fight for fairness in our marriage. It was a fight for my voice to be heard, for my sacrifices to be acknowledged, and for a partnership that truly shared both the joys and the pains of the life we had built together. As the rift between Ethan and me deepened, the silence in our home grew heavier, almost tangible in its presence. With each passing day, the divide seemed to solidify, turning from a crack into a chasm. Desperate for some semblance of understanding, I reached out to our mutual friend, Dr. Lisa Martin, who was also a seasoned counselor. Ethan had always respected her, and I clung to the hope that her involvement might steer us back toward common ground. Sitting in Lisa's office, the comforting familiarity of the setting felt stark against the turmoil of my emotions. I unfolded our story with a quiet urgency, detailing the surgeries, the physical toll of my pregnancies, and the unresolved conversations about sterilization. The words spilled out, each one laden with the weariness of carrying this burden alone. Lisa listened with her characteristic calm, her nods and gentle prompts encouraging me to explore not just the events, but the feelings intertwined with them. I spoke of my exhaustion, the unfairness I felt, and the growing fear that Ethan's refusal to consider sterilization was not just about avoiding surgery, but perhaps about keeping his options open, options that didn't include me. "Let's bring Ethan into the conversation," Lisa suggested gently, proposing a joint session to explore these fears openly. It was a logical step, one necessary to mend or at least understand the fractures in our relationship. The evening that Ethan joined me at Lisa's office was fraught with a tension that seemed to thicken the air around us. We sat across from each other, both of us encased in our apprehensions, our defenses palpable. Lisa facilitated the conversation with tact, but no amount of mediation could veil the stark discomfort Ethan displayed. As the session unfolded, it became evident that our perspectives were not just misaligned, but perhaps irreconcilable. When prompted to share his views, Ethan's responses were terse, his tone defensive. "I just think it makes more sense for you to do it," he repeated, his words echoing the many times we'd circled this argument at home. I tried to convey the depth of my exhaustion and fear, the physical and emotional toll it had taken, and how his insistence felt like a dismissal of all that I had endured. "Don't you see how much I've already gone through?" I implored, hoping to breach the walls of his resolve. Ethan's rebuttal was a blend of frustration and finality. "I'm just not comfortable with the idea of surgery on me." "It's different," he stated, shutting down further discussion. His unwillingness to delve deeper into his reasons or to genuinely consider my plight left a cold realization in its wake. As the session drew to a close, it was clear that no resolution lay on this path. The counseling had not been the bridge I had hoped for, but rather a mirror, reflecting the stark reality of our disconnect. We left Lisa's office with a polite goodbye, the air between us thick with unspoken acknowledgments of a future increasingly in doubt. In the days that followed, our home life resumed its routine, a facade of normalcy that fooled neither of us. The unresolved issue of sterilization loomed large, a symbol of the broader disparities in our marriage. My health, both physical and emotional, continued to bear the brunt of this impasse. As I grappled with the fallout, the realization that perhaps not all chapters in our lives could conclude with mutual understanding began to settle in. The strain on our marriage was palpable, each interaction tinged with the residue of our failed negotiations. It seemed at last that some distances grew too vast to bridge, and some wounds too deep to heal within the confines of a relationship strained beyond its limits. This growing acknowledgement didn't come with relief, but with a profound sense of grief, for the partnership we could not salvage, and the future we would not share. The resolution, when it finally came, was not one of reconciliation, but of resignation, a quiet, painful acceptance of our divergent paths. A month has slipped by, and the silence between Ethan and me has settled into our home like a thick fog, chilling and pervasive. We move around each other like ghosts, haunting the spaces we once filled with laughter and conversation. The touch, once a source of comfort and connection, has now become something I recoil from. To his attempts to bridge the gap with a gentle caress on my arm or a tentative kiss on the forehead meeting the stone wall of my withdrawal. To his earlier stance, marked by what I felt was profound selfishness, has pushed me to this point. Yet despite the Cold War that delineates our interactions, the thought of divorce slices through me with terror. I can't bear to think of our two children, Lucas and Ava, navigating the aftermath of a broken family. The idea of them having to split their lives between two homes to see their father's presence reduced to weekends or holidays is more than I can stand. So the stability of their world, so dearly bought, weighs heavily against the hurt that now colors my days. I'm stuck in this limbo, caught between my hurt and the potential upheaval a separation could cause our children. How do I move forward from here? How do I resolve a matter that seems to have no clear path to peace? The narrative of Emily and Ethan provides profound insights into the complexities of love, responsibility, selfishness, and sacrifice in relationships, particularly when strained by significant health and ethical decisions. Love in any meaningful relationship requires flexibility and understanding. It's not only about affection and compatibility, but also about adapting and responding to the challenges and needs of one's partner. The story highlights how Ethan's inflexibility regarding the decision on sterilization led to a breakdown in understanding, showing that love needs to be accommodating and responsive to thrive. Responsibility within a marriage extends beyond individual desires, encompassing the welfare of the entire family. Emily's contemplation of both her health and the emotional well-being of her children exemplifies a deep sense of responsibility. It shows that responsible decisions support the stability and happiness of all family members, not just the individual making the choice. Selfishness, as demonstrated by Ethan's refusal to consider an alternative approach to sterilization, can undermine the mutual respect that is foundational to any partnership. His insistence on Emily undergoing surgery, despite her extensive medical history and associated risks, highlights how prioritizing personal comfort over a partner's well-being can erode trust and respect. In any balanced relationship, sacrifices should be shared. The narrative underscores the toll that unreciprocated sacrifices can take on a person's health and emotional state. When both partners are willing to make sacrifices, it strengthens their bond and fosters a true sense of partnership, which was missing in Emily and Ethan's interactions. The story also emphasizes the importance of communication in resolving conflicts. The lack of open dialogue between Emily and Ethan only worsened their situation, illustrating that effective communication is crucial for understanding each other's perspectives and finding common ground. Sometimes, internal efforts to resolve disputes are insufficient, as evident from Emily and Ethan's failure to reconcile their differences alone. Seeking external help, such as from counselors or therapists, can offer new perspectives and facilitate constructive discussions, providing essential guidance for couples struggling with similar issues. Lastly, the decisions made in a relationship have long-term implications that go beyond the immediate circumstances. They affect the future emotional and physical health of both partners and their children. So this story serves as a reminder of the need for compassion, compromise, and courage in facing tough decisions together, ensuring that the relationship nurtures mutual respect and shared sacrifices.